this is just the beginning.
Welcome to Investment in Renewable Energy virtual event. I'm Andrew Friedman, climate and energy reporter at Axios. I'm coming to you from Silver Spring, Maryland. Thank you to Facebook for making this conversation possible on investment in renewable energy. Welcome to our audiences on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and on Axios.com. Join the conversation today on Twitter with @Axios and #AxiosEvents. Over the next 30 minutes, I will be joined by my colleague, Ben Gieman. We will unpack the shift to wind and solar jobs, to the recent spike in private and equity investment, and what this means for the future. Our first guest is the junior Democratic senator from Delaware, Senator Chris Coons, joining us from Washington, D.C. Senator, thank you for joining Axios. We're really happy to have you with us.
Thanks, Andrew. Good afternoon. Great to be on with you.
Senator, you've been authoring and co-authoring a string of bills with your Republican colleagues to encourage investments in renewables and other cutting-edge technologies to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Why do you think bipartisan cooperation is possible at this point on this issue in such a polarized Washington? And can you tell me a little bit about the themes running through the bills that you've been already introducing this session of Congress?
Sure, Andrew. Some of the bills that I've been working on that are bipartisan go back to the time when I served on the Energy Committee. Now, that's quite a while ago, 6 to 10 years ago at this point. And some of them are brand new. I've just introduced them for the first time in this Congress. Through all of them, I've been serving in a Senate where the majority has shifted back and forth between Democrats and Republicans. And through the entire decade that I've been here, to do real policy on energy, you had to have a bipartisan bill. So it's not just an enthusiasm or a temporary interest of mine. This is something that's been a part of how I've tried to legislate for a decade. I'll give you an example of one of the oldest bills I've been working on. Jerry Moran of Kansas, Republican, is my lead, but I've got a wide range of both Democratic and Republican partners in something that's titled Financing Our Energy Future. It takes an obscure capital formation tool, the Master Limited Partnership, that is really important for pipelines and makes it available to renewables. It actually would be one of the biggest new capital access opportunities for renewables in our tax code in a long time, because it would be permanent. And I've got folks like Senator Murkowski, Senator Crapo, Senator Roberts, many others have been on it in past Congresses, and Senator Moran and I are excited about this bill. It passed the House in the last Congress, and I'm optimistic it can pass the Senate in this Congress. A much more recent bill, Andrew, is the SCALE Act that Senator Cassidy of Louisiana and I have been moving. This would create incentives specifically for carbon dioxide pipelines, building out the infrastructure at scale that is essential if carbon capture and sequestration is going to be real. That's something that President Biden has included in his American Jobs Plan. And I'm thrilled at the opportunity we have here with a president who is really leading on climate, who from his first days as president has taken bold action, not just to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement, but to lay out significant and strong commitments for emissions reductions, and now for the investment to bring new technologies to scale.
In terms of you mentioned the American Jobs Plan, and as you know, President Biden has proposed the most far-reaching climate proposals of any president that we've seen. He's been spending weeks negotiating with Republicans on what seems to be a scaled-down first package. I've been hearing from climate activists worried that their priorities, including your bill to create a citizen climate corps, may be left out of any deal in the first round of legislation. They're worried that, maybe the second piece of legislation either won't happen or will also be scaled down. Do you think there's any, that there's anything to those concerns? And have you been trying to, talk with the White House team to make sure that climate provisions are in that first infrastructure bill?
Well, Andrew, look, I understand the concerns some have expressed, but I think the path forward here has been pretty simple from when President Biden first announced the American Jobs Plan. Several Democrats right up front said they would not vote for a Democrats-only reconciliation bill that was trillions of dollars. That made it clear that what folks in the Senate, like myself, who strongly support President Biden's vision, what we had to do was to first work as hard as we can to pull together a bipartisan package on hard infrastructure, on investments in roads and bridges and tunnels and airports and so forth. And we've made great progress on that. There is a next step proposal, counter proposal coming from a group of Republican senators today. But we have not slowed down and not stepped aside from the bold investments, including the Civilian Climate Corps, that's in the American Jobs Plan in portions that I really don't expect we're going to win Republican support for. And I think this is just a two-step process. One is we pass as much as we can, as big as we can as a bipartisan infrastructure package. And then two is we then move to a Democrats-only bill that is bold, that invests in climate justice and economic resiliency. And I think a Civilian Climate Corps is a key part of that. It will create great jobs for young Americans serving our country, doing some of the hard work in our public lands and in parks and public spaces all over our nation that we need to be prepared for climate resiliency and to give a new generation of Americans an opportunity for an earned college opportunity through national service. That's got broad bipartisan support. We just saw some polling that says more than 80% of Americans 18 to 25 of all political backgrounds think national service is a great idea and are excited to participate. And so, frankly, to those who are concerned that this piece will somehow get left behind, I'll tell you, I'm not going to let that happen. I am going to fight tirelessly for a Civilian Climate Corps, which I think this moment demands.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think the biggest areas of agreement are between Democrats and your Republican colleagues on climate change? I know you've been able to work with various people in the Republican caucus, including Senator Moran, including Lisa Murkowski and others, Senator Cassidy, for example. But where have you found like the common ground? Is it really about technology and next generation technology and potential jobs, or is it another narrow set of issues that I'm not mentioning here?
Andrew, one of the things I've been saying to folks who joined the Biden administration, who were part of the Obama administration and who were active on climate in Washington 5 years ago, I've said to them that the environment here has changed in a real way. And I think the best evidence of that is the conversations we have every month on the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus that I founded and I lead with Mike Braun. Mike Braun is a conservative Republican from downstate Indiana, the coal mining part of Indiana. We have 7 Republicans and 6 Democrats and 1 independent, so 14 members from all over the political spectrum, from folks like Mitt Romney and Lindsey Graham and Susan Collins to folks like Debbie Stabenow and Jeanne Shaheen and Angus King. We span a lot of different committees. Let me mention 3 things that I think have changed that are important. First is every one of the 14 senators in this group, including those 7 Republicans, agrees that the climate is changing dramatically, that human action is driving that change, and that we must take action to address it. Climate denialism has largely died away here in the Senate as a constant theme from the Republican Party. Second, we've had meeting after meeting with both activists and advocates, research and science leaders, but also CEOs, leaders of major companies, oil and gas companies, business organizations like the NAM and the Chamber of Commerce, folks who lead major companies like Ford and GM or major financial services companies. And every single one of them has said, the climate is changing, humans are causing it, we have to change it, and we need to put a price on carbon. That's a big change from what you would have heard from the CEOs of major companies 5 to 10 years ago. Last, and this is something I think hasn't been reported or covered as much, there's a real enthusiasm in the conservative religious community amongst evangelicals for tackling climate change. And Pope Francis, as the world leader of Catholicism, has taken on climate change as one of his top priorities. That's changing some of the conversation back home. When I said to Mike Braun, I was stunned when I first sat down with him as a new freshman senator, and I was trying to explore what I could possibly work with him on. I was very surprised to hear that for him, tackling climate change was a top priority, and he thought a way we really could do it was in part through growing natural solutions, changing agricultural practices, providing incentives for dramatically increasing forestry and forested lands in the world. And so we have another bipartisan bill called Growing Climate Solutions that Senator Stabenow and Senator Braun are moving through the Agriculture Committee. Actually, I'm sorry, it's come through the Agriculture Committee and it's ready for floor action. It's been endorsed by groups like the American Farm Bureau that previously would have been opposed to anything with the words climate change in it. So I think there's been some change in what are the topics we're working on and what is the path forward. I agree with you, Andrew, that investing in technology and investing in building out at scale some of the things we need, like carbon capture and sequestration infrastructure, has Republican support. But there's also these new themes moving in how Republicans are responding to climate change, at least here in the Senate.
Thank you, Senator, for joining us. And next, we have a view from the top segment with my colleague, Senior Director of Strategy at Axios, Jordan Zaslav.
Thank you, Andrew. And now joining us from Oakland, California, the head of renewable energy at Facebook, Orvi Perek. Welcome, Orvi.
Hi, nice to be here.
It's great to have you. So, Orvi, when I hear or think about renewable energy, my mind usually goes to environmental impacts. But in the report you released this week, you tell a much bigger story. These are massive infrastructure projects. Can you tell us more about the economic impact this is having in the communities you're partnering with?
I'm happy to. So my role at Facebook is really about overseeing Facebook's goal to reach 100% renewable energy across all of our operations. This includes the 80 offices that we have globally and our data centers. And the report that we released this week is really quantifying the 6,000 megawatts of renewable energy that Facebook has contracted with over the last 8 years, and starting to really help elected officials and the public understand the job creation potential that these renewable energy projects are bringing. So what our report talked about is a $3 billion of investment in infrastructure that's going to U.S. suppliers and 40,000 construction jobs for these projects in 18 states across the U.S. And so it's really impressive when you look at just one company's effort and what it's really creating.
Yeah, I mean, $3 billion and 40,000 jobs, like those are big numbers. And, you know, I'd love to learn more about like where are those happening? Is it fair to assume that the majority of these projects are actually in leading renewable states, places that I would think of like Texas, California, or Virginia?
Well, I think that's what makes the fact that we have contracted with renewable energy in the U.S. across 18 states. And so one of the things that this study really does break down is how many jobs are coming to each of these states. We had a third-party research firm called RTI International take a look at all the projects in our portfolio, and they went through and quantified the jobs that were coming to each of these states. And what we saw was impressive. We saw things that we hadn't anticipated in the analysis, which is that 96% of our renewable energy projects are outside of metropolitan areas. And of these, 82% are in counties which have poverty levels above the national average. And so really what renewable energy is bringing to these areas is a new opportunity for economic development and job creation in counties that really need it.
Yes, that's amazing. So the majority were really not centers of renewable energy before this. How are you able to bring in an investment of this size and scale to life in these new communities?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, you know, one thing that we've discovered is we are one of the largest renewable energy buyers in states like Utah, Tennessee, and in Georgia. And these are states that have more recently become hotbeds of renewable energy activity, primarily because of the work that Facebook has done behind the scenes to create new buying options with our utilities. When we show up and we are talking about adding a new data center in a community, one of the first conversations we have is with the electric utility. And because being 100% renewable energy is part of our fundamental goals, we are talking from day one about how could we work with that utility to add new wind and solar resources to their electrical grid that could serve our data center and serve their broader customers. And so that's where suddenly markets like Utah, Georgia, and Alabama and Tennessee, where we have data centers, have become these fast-growing renewable energy markets because we are asking for a lot of electricity from these renewable energy projects to help support our ability to grow our data centers.
And you tell me if this is right, but when I think about the way you talk about really changing and augmenting the grid with new sources of energy, does this have a follow-on effect for others? Like, what does this mean for companies in these states who may not have been using renewable before?
I think what we're hoping it means is that other customers who show up and are asking their utility for 100% options are also finding that they can use the tariffs and the buying programs that we've created. So that's always the intention when we're creating one of these programs, is to make it eligible to companies beyond Facebook, because access to renewable energy more broadly is something that we really value. And so what we've seen following on some of our own renewable energy purchases in states like Georgia, Utah, and Alabama has been other companies coming in and using the same programs. And these can be universities, they can be cities, and they can also be other companies who don't have as large of a team and haven't been able to dedicate the resources. And so they're adding their own renewable energy projects as well.
And so, how do you take this mission wider? What do you say to states that might still be hesitant about undergoing a partnership like this?
I think one thing that this study really does is it provides a template for states to think about what could be the impact of attracting companies who have 100% renewable energy commitments and seeing pathways that other states have taken to bring these jobs into their backyards. I think also what it should remind cities and different states is that customers really do want renewable energy. And it's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about is how can we increase access? And today it's how can Facebook think about other companies that are similarly sized to us, but something we sort of more broadly think about is how do we make renewable energy available to smaller companies and others who would like to get access to being able to add new renewable energy to the grid.
Thank you, Orvi. And thinking back across our conversation, I can really think of Facebook's renewable energy initiative probably better as a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure investment that's generated over 40,000 jobs and added renewable energy options to the grids in the communities you operate in. And ultimately, that provides businesses with new choices in where they get their energy. So thank you, Orvi, for joining Axios today.
It's been great to be here. Thanks, Jordan.
And thank you to Facebook, our sponsor, for making today's conversation possible. Now, over to my colleague, Ben.
Thanks, Jordan. I'm Ben Gieman, and I'm an energy reporter for Axios. Our final guest is the founder and CEO of WeSolar, Kristal Hansley, joining us from Baltimore, Maryland. Hi, Kristal. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, Ben. Glad to be here.
Great. Yeah. So, Kristal, you deploy a growing and really important kind of solar power, but it's one that I'm not sure all of our viewers know about. What is community solar?
Yes, community solar is the fastest growing sector in the solar space, where it's technically called virtual net metering. And for consumers and end users, residents or commercial buildings, you do not have to put solar panels on your roof. You're able to tap into an off-site location, whether it's on the roof space or a ground mount system, and receive solar benefits directly on your utility bill. Hence, community solar.
Oh, that's so interesting. One of your past comments about this topic that I thought was really important was you said community solar is about people. Can you unpack that? How can community solar address not only clean power and climate aims, but also economic and racial inequities?
Oh, sure. Well, right now, the solar industry or the user, only about 20% of American households have access, meaning you have to own a roof, you have to be able to tap into a loan and have the credit score to have the approval for the loan, whereas now community solar opens the market by 80%. means that, underrepresented communities, minorities, BIPOC populations, frontline communities that deal with the brunt of climate change can now also be a part of this just transition and have access to the benefits of solar, receiving up to, in like DC, where the SREC market is, ridiculously competitive. LMI customers can receive about 50% off, and other jurisdictions 30% off their bills. That's significant, especially as we climb our way out of this pandemic.
Oh, that's terrific. Do you think there's a broad awareness in the public about how, for so many people, how affordable solar is becoming, but also some of the ways that they can reduce their bills in the way you've just walked me through?
Yes, well, that's one of my main points of advocating and saying, look, there's a lot of resources here. And when you look to the community, we know what our issues are, but we also are the ones to have the solutions for them. And so to me, to have a community solar pilot program in Maryland and other 20 states, with New Mexico being the latest jurisdiction to pass the state law, it really creates that accessibility for the community and also allow those who were generally marginalized to be a part of this movement.
Definitely. Now, your path to becoming a solar CEO actually went through the U.S. Congress, where you worked for several years. Has that informed your approach at all to this topic and to this work that you're doing?
Yes, because like I said, community solar passed in a lot of the state houses at the state level. And so even when that was taking place, it still got caught up in a lot of local politics, being an advocate and also a community organizer. My mom was a community organizer. I'm a 3-time generation community organizer. Attending hearings to get it out of the moratorium stages was something, I saw on Capitol Hill and at the federal level. So advocating at the state and local level, it wasn't, a new experience for me. And so that definitely helped, with being one of the very first pioneers in the space to get it off the ground, even once it passed the state levels, to make sure that it's active on the local levels.
One of the things that's happening in Congress right now is that we have these efforts to pass a fairly large piece of infrastructure legislation. And from a community solar standpoint, what policies or provisions should be in the mix?
Yeah, I think the solar industry is heading in the right trajectory, and therefore it directly impacts the community solar space. SEIA and IRAC, Solar Trade Organization, passed a recent study that showed that there was a slight dip in solar jobs. And so it was about a 6.7% dip considering the pandemic and adding around 200,000 solar jobs. And we will have to see some reversal on that if we would like to hit the Biden's goal of 400,000 by 2030 and then 900,000 by 2035. Which would, definitely create the infrastructural and the green jobs, the Green New Deal that a lot of our leaders are aiming for. And I think that as we climb through this pandemic, we're on the right track to hit those goals.
Yeah, how has it, certainly renewables, unlike some other forms of generation, we've just seen renewables grow and grow through the pandemic. But that said, certainly I would think that the ability to sort of bring in new customers and the ability to do outreach have been affected by the pandemic. How has WeSolar kind of fought through COVID-19?
Yeah, so we tapped into our community ties, our partnerships. We have over 100 partner nonprofit organizations, community organizations. And so because we didn't start at the pandemic and as everyone was transitioning to virtual and Zoom meetings, we just made the same pivot. In fact, a lot of the outreach that we were doing, and I already created a model where we worked from home. So at least my team, it wasn't a huge adjustment. We just took the community meetings and continued the path that the country was heading. And to me, that's a really good example as far as how tech and solar can continue to grow, and we use these technologies and reach more people while doing so.
Definitely. Yeah, no, that's actually leads into one of the things I wanted to ask you about, which is how how should the solar industry itself it kind of evolved to tackle the multiple goals that we've been discussing, both on the climate change front, but also on the economic justice front. What direction would you like to see the solar industry kind of moving in on those topics?
Yeah, I think that, we're again on the right path. We took a slight dip due to the pandemic and we're crawling our way out of it, as well as other industries. I would like to see more diversity. Obviously, there was a recent report stating that 90% of executives and 80% of workers are just, it's extremely homogeneous sector. And so as we tap into, hey, how can we get better? How can we continue to look at innovation in the solar space or storage? Look at the new research and all the new technologies that's coming out, even in the battery market. I think if we tapped into the metrics that how we recruit and, tap some of the HBCUs and look at their engineers, that would even make a more creative and more robust market in general.
And is there kind of a recognition of that fact or of that need sort of in industry-wide at this point? Is that moving in the right direction?
I definitely see that from ACOR, from SEIA. There's a lot of solar executives that's really taking a baton and calling meetings and work groups and saying, we need to do something about this. The White House initiative, there's a new BOSS solar initiative of Black solar executives. And so, there is definitely movement there. And I look forward to being a part of that change as well.
Do you feel like you have an ally in the White House at this point?
I think it's very friendly as it relates to renewables. The legislation has to get passed, right? And so until we can really say that we're allies, I think we want to see the legislation. It's not just one house or, one party. It really takes everyone, the community. And, that's why I love community solar. It encompasses, the middle class, the working class, the higher income groups. And so it really would take the entire country to champion the solar industry as well as the community solar sector within that space.
One interesting thing about your company is that customers to take advantage of community solar, as I understand it, actually don't need to split with their existing utility. But overall, are the big incumbent power companies, either in your service areas or elsewhere, are they doing enough to enable customers to use community solar and to find community solar?
Yes, I think there's more utilities that's more friendly than others. And as they still try to figure out, how's this market really going to reflect their bottom line and are they going to lose customers? I think that, no, you wouldn't lose customers. It's a group effort. And, yes, you have local utilities and they have no choice that once they pass the State House to really cooperate with local community solar developers and firms. But for the other side of the country who do not have the laws in place, they're advocating. Once, the energy crisis that took place a few weeks ago in Texas, I had hundreds of residents in Texas reach out saying, we would love to have this type of, pilot program here. And so, we're advocating in jurisdictions that do not have community solar, and the utilities are at the table with us.
That's good to know. And that tie into the unfortunately tragic but extreme weather events we're seeing. It sounds like that perhaps is driving more interest in community solar.
Absolutely. People are looking for a change and want to be a part of that change.
Definitely. Well, I think we're going to make that the last word. Kristal Hansley, thank you so much for joining Axios.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for joining us this afternoon for another virtual conversation that has made everyone smarter and faster. Thank you to our sponsor, Facebook, for making this event possible. And for more information or to sign up for our energy and climate newsletter, Axios Generate, visit axios.com/newsletters or check it out on the Axios app. Thanks again.